We are going to talk today about Power BI advanced dashboards. And I was asking people as they joined, how many of you are new to Power BI? How many are intermediates, advanced? A lot of people are new, perfectly fine. Every time I present about 40% of my content is for beginners, 40% of my content is for kind of the intermediates, and I save about 20% for the advanced. So I try not to bore people. If you're really, knowledgeable on Power BI, I'm going to share some stuff I think that you will learn interesting today, and I also won't talk way above your head. So if any of those happen, just hold on a second because I'll get back to one or the other, but I try to do it for all audiences. Let's get into kind of who we are. I think I told you on the invite, I'm going to give you less than a minute or two of a sales pitch, and the rest of it is just demo. And here's the sales pitch. We're Fuji. We're worldwide. We got about 600. We're a little less than that now. We're about 550, somewhere around there. Offices in the U.S. We're headquartered, and we are a U.S. company, but we do have offices offshore in Costa Rica and a very large facility in India. Lots of architects and designers, everything else. We only do 4 key things, and I think this is what really distinguishes us. A lot of partners try to do everything, and we focus on digital, which is product tests, product development, project engineering, low code, no code, which I've done a huge number of these webinars on low code, no code. It's an absolutely fascinating, growing subject right now. Cloud services, moving people to cloud, designing, architecting, implementing. Cybersecurity, we have a whole security operations center. We do managed services around security as well. And then what you're here today, a ton of data analytics, data engineering, data visualization. Who am I? I am an ex-Microsoft employee. Some of you have probably been to my previous webinars. We get a lot of people that come to more than one, and I encourage that as much as possible. These are just every 2 weeks, we do free deep dives into the technology. So I came from Microsoft. I spent more than 18 years there. I helped run some of the seminar divisions of Microsoft. I actually helped create the seminar team. So if you've ever been to an MSDN event or a TechNet event or TS2 or small business, those were my groups. I'm a generalist, which is kind of unusual. Microsoft today, they hire specialists. When they hire someone, they'll hire a SQL Server specialist who knows all about SQL Server. I started at Microsoft in 1990, and back then we had to learn everything. We had to learn from Outlook and Office to SQL Server to Xbox. We had to do just pretty much everything there was. And so I continue that today. I'm really good at showing how all the stuff kind of works together. And then that's it. That was the whole sales pitch right there. So let's dive into the technology. What I want to talk about today, this is the 3rd or 4th Power BI session I've done. And I'll give you 2 seconds also of my background. While I was at Microsoft for about 7 years, I actually was in the role of data analyst. I did regular reports every single month that were submitted directly to the executive board of Microsoft. So this was for Bill Gates and all the top executives. It was my job to keep them up to date on reporting. So I'm hoping to share not only how the technology works, but give you real life examples of how the data is used by executives. And the first question that people often ask is, well, what's wrong with the default dashboards? And the answer is absolutely nothing. This is a typical default dashboard. But when we look at this thing and we think with the mind of an executive, I'm going to share some of the learnings that I had for producing these. It is functional, it works well, it's okay, it looks, you could argue it looks kind of weird, but there's a lot going on this page. And dashboards in particular, whether it's a report or it's an executive dashboard that you are literally creating for the executives, needs to tell a story. There's a purpose behind the data itself. Just throwing a bunch of data on a page really doesn't do anyone any good, because these executives are often looking at this. And when I presented these reports, the average time that the executive looks at my report is maybe 5 minutes. So they need to be able to pull data out really, really fast. And so just really quick, just with a critical eye, if you were looking at this dashboard and you were being super critical, does anyone have any thoughts around what could be improved or what's not working so well with this. This is a very, very kind of typical dashboard that you'd see in Power BI. And I apologize, I do have to pull this up because I can't see everyone's comments. Remember, you have the questions section here. And if you want to type a comment or whatever, we got a small enough group, you can actually just come off mute and just talk if you'd like. But any feedback on this dashboard, if you were being super critical of this particular dashboard, what would you say about it? Anyone got any ideas? It's an old presenter trick, so I can take a drink, but let's kind of look at it from top to bottom and look at what's going on. First off, what is the purpose of this particular page? And it's not immediately clear. I've got a bar graph and I've got a scatter graph, and I've got a tree map, and I've got some other stuff, but I don't really understand how all this is relating together. Obviously, if I knew more about this business, it might make a lot more sense. I've got these filters, and we'll talk about filters here in a second. They're running down the left side. These are called slicers, and they allow me to slice up the data, and it looks like I'm allowed to slice by industry and by product. And then I've got some data points up along the upper right top part of this. You'll see it says 80 customers, 5 products, gross margin of 42.5%. And again, I see this all the time when I go teach classes, and I teach a lot of Power BI classes. You know, this is very typical. Well, let's start. I'll tell you the things I think about when I look at this. First off, again, if you're telling a story, I don't know what story this is telling. The purpose of an executive reading a dashboard is to very quickly disseminate information. And so we want to be very explicit about what we're trying to explain is going on. And we're going to get into the deep technical stuff in a second. I'm just kind of laying it out at a high level. What is the, let me ask this to the group, let's see, and this is for 1 million imaginary points, because that's all I kind of gave away today. But what is the most important real estate on this screen? If you think about the value of the screen and where executive eyes are going to be drawn to first, any guesses to what the most important location on the entire screen might be? Anyone got any thoughts? And again, you can just say it out loud or you can type it in. Either one is fine. Oh, top left and the dropping line. You're exactly right. This area right up in here is the most important area. And the reason why is because we're English speaking, and therefore the upper left is where we start to read. We read from top to bottom, left to right. So they will always move their eyes to this section first, just out of natural habit. So here I'm using the most important section for a single tagline that says industry margin analysis. I guess that's good. It tells me what this is, but it doesn't really tell me anything about this. I see this revenue status, and I've got this little teeny green circle. And then I've got this thing that says number of customers 80. Now this is a real problem with companies, and this was a huge problem with Microsoft. Microsoft absolutely loves features. They're a feature-based company. And when we talk in general, whenever you do reporting or sales or whatever, they always talk about features versus benefits. And I won't take you through a whole class, although believe me, I could, about the difference between a feature and a benefit. A feature is a statement of fact, okay? And features mean very, very little. Statements of fact mean very, very little. Let me give you an example. Number of customers equals 80, okay? That is an absolute statement of fact. The obvious question is 80 a good number? I have absolutely no reference to determine if 80 is good or bad. Was that more than I had last month, or was it less? Should I be worried that it's 80, or should I be super proud and excited that it's 80? So whenever we display data, we want to give a reference to that data to tell me if this is a good number or bad number. I've worked with many, many people, and they say, oh, the executives know this stuff right off the top of the head. You don't have to put that up there. And my advice and my experience is they may know it, but they're not necessarily thinking of it when they're reading your data. So a good executive dashboard is always going to put a data point, a statement of fact, in reference to whatever it is that you're trying to say. So I could say, number of customers equals 80, and then right under it, I'd put this is 5% growth month over month or something like that to give them a feel that this is a good number. Same thing, number of products, 5. I don't know if that's good or bad. Gross margins, 42.5. These are all statements of fact, but they mean nothing until I put a reference against them. So that's a big issue. I'm getting a little bogged down. Let me just jump ahead because the next slide, I actually talk about what do you need to think about. Executives want a very quick summary. They want a fast drill down into the details so they can determine and they can make an understanding of, are we doing better? Are we doing worse? And they can do their executiveness. And I say executive, this is the same for a manager's, report or anything that you want to report on. I should mention too, I'm jumping around just a teeny bit, so I apologize, but there's an important thing that's happened in the industry, and a lot of people haven't recognized this and don't understand it. So I want you all to know. Microsoft used to, long time ago, back when I started at Microsoft, we used to use Crystal Reports, right? That was the biggest report builder in the world. After Crystal Reports, then you got into SQL Server Reporting Services, SSRS. And for the last almost 20 years, SSRS has been the primary reporting tool for obviously SQL Server, but people use it for other things too. Microsoft has determined and has changed over since 2018 to Power BI as the unified universal reporting tool for all of Windows. And they've done this very slowly. They're slowly phasing this in, but very soon it will be the only reporting tool in the Windows environment. And so everyone needs to understand this. Even if you don't intend to use Power BI for the analytics part, for all the cool statistical analysis and charting and graphing and everything else, it doesn't matter. You still should learn Power BI simply because it will be the reporting tool that they use for Excel and Word and Exchange Server. Every Microsoft technology out there will use Power BI as its standardized reporting service. I've had fights is a big word. I've had disagreements with my current Microsoft employees, good friends of mine, who are like, I don't know if that's true, and et cetera. Gone back and forth and back and forth. It is true. The greatest example I can give you this is if you buy SQL Server today from Microsoft, by default, it does not install SQL Server reporting services. It's on the disk that you're given. The software is there, but it is no longer installed by default. Instead, Power BI is installed by default. And in the near future, they're just going to phase out SSRS entirely, and everyone's going to go with SQL Server, or I'm sorry, with Power BI. So I just want to make sure you understand this will be the unified reporting system for everything in the Windows environment. Let me stop for a second and just double check there aren't any questions on that. I don't see any, so I think we're good. Okay. Execs want that quick summary. They want to drill down really fast. And then as I pointed out, what's the point of the data? You gave me industry margin analysis, but it really didn't tell me what it is you're trying to convey in this particular report. And I'm going to show you some examples of some really good ones, or I think really good ones. There's no narrative describing the reports. And we're going to talk about how Power BI uses data in a way that lets you do a snapshot in time. I'll probably talk about that next as soon as I finish this slide. I want reference to the data, right? I just talked about this. Our 80 customers, is that a good number or bad number? Give me some reference point to anchor to know if the data you're telling me is good or bad. We talked about your eyes are immediately drawn. So this is your prime real estate up in this upper left corner. So we want the most important thing that I'm going to work on to be in that upper left-hand corner. The one thing, if they only have 2 seconds to look at my report, what is the most important? And that's where we want to put it. So that's where your eyes are immediately drawn. This drives me a little nuts because if you look, you can see there's a blank here, there's a blank column here. Excuse me. We would never in a million years submit a report to an executive at our company with the blank column in there. Blank means someone screwed up in entering data. You can even see the filter here has the word blank on it. And this is a real report I pulled off. Someone had actually submitted this. And I'm like, oh, that's so taboo. We don't do that. That just basically says I'm lazy and I haven't figured out all the data. And therefore, I've created this category called blank. I'm a little harsh on that. I realize there are circumstances where blank actually is a valid number, but we try to avoid that at all possible. And then this last piece is probably the most important piece. What they want to know are the outliers. They want to know, for example, when you look at this graph right here with all these dots, the stuff clustered here in the middle, that's not interesting to me. What's very interesting to me is this one red one that's way off by itself. It's an outlier that's separate from the data. The point of doing this, I guess it's okay to say, yeah, we're following the same trends we always have or whatever, but it's these outliers that there's always something that's of interest to those executives. These results are either above and beyond the norm, and if that's the case, I guarantee you they want to know why, or they're statistically well below the norm, in which case they definitely want to know why. Why did these sales fall off? Why is this so low? Why is this out of the norm? This graph here on the bottom right is a great example. I can see that everyone's kind of trucking around and they're going in similar ways, and then all of a sudden in July of this year, everyone falls off the planet on this huge chasm. The second I showed this to execs, this is where they're going to want to go. So a good dashboard is going to identify it, show it, and then call it out and try to explain why. COVID hit and everyone shut down, and for 3 weeks, nothing was getting done. That might be a valid explanation to why. But we as data analysts, or we as those creating the reports, need to explain this story to the executives in a way in which they'll understand, and you got to do it very fast, very quick, very efficient. So that's why, even though this is a default dashboard, it's not a very good one. We're going to talk today about how to set up a good one, and then we're going to get into some of the technical aspects of how to do it correctly, because believe me, there's a right and a wrong way. I'm going to look again, see if there's any questions. Does anyone have any questions real quick? We're up to 12 attendees. Great. Welcome everyone who joined. So if you have questions, feel free to come off mute or throw it into the questions section, and I'll check periodically, make sure I'm getting them answered. So this is an example of kind of a not great, but a better report. And we're going to go into the actual building of this. Excuse me, I'll take you step by step, but let's call out a couple of good things. I'll call out one big negative in this particular case, which is, remember, the upper left is our prime real estate. And in this particular one, you can see all the slicers or filters are set to the upper left. That's actually probably not good design. This should have slipped and moved over to the far right because it's the optional part of the report. Now, before I get into this, let me talk real quick about how Power BI creates data. It's really important to understand this. And there's not just one way in which data is created. Data can be accessed in multiple different ways, but typically, this is what I want to go through. When you create a Power BI report, your source data is often protected from your report. What do I mean by that? Power BI is going to create a data cube, an actual data object on your desktop, and it's going to fill it up with a copy of your data from whatever source you pick. Now, the reason that Microsoft did it this way, and again, it's not the only way, but most, if you just start using Power BI, you're going to create data cubes. Data cubes are built because, let's say myself and Stephanie decide that we want to use the corporate data, and we go out and we hit the database, and that database could be Microsoft Access, it could be an Excel file, it could be a giant Oracle or SQL Server database, right? It doesn't matter what the back end is, but that's where my data source is. I go out and I look at the data, and as I'm pulling the data across, I only care about the US because that's my market, and Stephanie cares about Europe, so she's doing EMEA stuff. In the US, we call things a postal code, right, or a zip code. And in other countries, they may call it a postal code or mailing code or whatever. I call it a cell phone, they call it a mobile phone. I call it, 1,000 different ways to call the same data source. But here's the deal, we both start making queries, we're both generating reports. If I go in and change any bit of the original source data, it blows up everything that Stephanie is working on. And we got to imagine it's not just Stephanie, there may be 50 other people all pulling from that same centralized data source. So what Microsoft does is they protect that by allowing you to create a data cube. And I'm just going to jump over and do a demo of this real quick. So I've got Power BI going here. I'm going to just create a brand new one. We'll start over from scratch. And if you've seen me present before, you've seen me use the same data over and over again. But I'm going to create a brand new Power BI report. These are ones that I have for later. I'll show you how we do some of the good looking stuff. Excuse me. Okay, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go get my data. Now, Power BI uses data connectors that honestly can connect to any data source in the world. There's 88, or actually that was the last count. I'm sure there are probably over 100 different existing data connectors already out for everything that's out there. There's AWS connectors, there's Salesforce connectors, there's Facebook connectors, any source that you can think of, there's pretty much going to be a standard connector in here. And then Microsoft also built kind of these universal data connectors. They can read CSV volumes, they can read text. They actually have a website connector where you can just go to a website. As long as you can see it on a web page, you can scrape the data off a web page. I use that one quite a lot. We've talked about that in some of these other ones. For many people, and they break these down into categories. Here's all the file related ones. Here's all the database, IBM, DB2, Sybase, Postgre, on and on and on. You can pretty much find it out here. A lot of people, however, just use simple Excel lists that they have in their organization. So I'm going to show you an Excel list. And I'm going to connect to it. I've got one here. It's called the Full Master Database. And I will connect to this. Now what's happening, I'll kind of describe this as we go. This is up on a server, and it's a very large database, over 1 million records. So I'm connecting to this, and you're going to see that I'm not going to directly connect to the database. In other words, if this was an Oracle or SQL Server or anything, it doesn't matter, even it being in an Excel file, it's going to create an interim connection between Power BI and my actual source data. And Microsoft and the whole industry talks about ETL, extract, transform, and load, which means I need to be able to get the data. I want to change it around to whatever I want that data to be and then use it. And I don't want those changes to impact anybody else. So what you're seeing here is it's loaded up the Excel spreadsheets. And I'll just grab a few of these. These are actual tabs inside of Excel. These are the ones I'm going to need, these 4. And again, I come back for the other Power BI and go much slower and explain this a lot more. I'm just trying to give you an idea. And I can load this data here, but I also can transform the data. Now I am seeing the data live. This is actually the sheets. If I go to the relational and I scroll down enough, there's almost 1 million records here. But I'm going to, instead of loading it directly into Power BI, I'm going to do this thing called transform. And I want to describe what's happening. It looks like I'm in Power BI, but I'm not. I'm actually in this thing called Power Query. Power Query is a completely separate application that allows you to manipulate and manage and change your source data without it actually ever writing back to the original records. So if I was connected to a SQL Server or an Oracle and I make a change here, the Power Query understands that change and lets me see that change, but it never writes it back to the original source data so that it doesn't mess up Stephanie or the 30 other people who are using that. So just to show you, this is a separate application. It looks like it's embedded into Power BI because Power BI is running in the back, but it's its own application. This is the same Power Query that also runs inside of Excel and Word and PowerPoint and pretty much everything that Microsoft has. So it's an interim connector to the data. And I want you to watch what I can do. I'm going to go to this relational table. This has the almost, I think it has 800,000 rows, something like that. And I don't want to call it the relational table. So I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to rename the table. So I'm going to go and instead of relational, I'm going to call this the sales table. Okay. Now, if I had done that live against an Oracle database or a SQL database, I would have just blown up everyone's reports because the entire table name has been changed. But that doesn't happen here with Power Query. What it's going to do is it's going to create my own data cube version of the data that I'm working on. And it's going to remember that, yes, it's really called relational, but Mike has changed the name to sales. And it'll juggle all those changes for me. Let me show you another one. I'm going to go here, scroll down a little bit further into this list. There's a lot of data here. Here's a sales ID. And that's not really the sales ID, that's the sales rep ID. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to change this. I right click on it. I'm going to go back to rename, and I'm going to call this sales rep. I want to keep it all one word, ID. Okay. And again, I just now, not only did I change a table, but I changed the name of a column in a table. I'm even going to drag this visually, just pick this up, and I'm going to move it to the left, a couple of squares. I can move it all the way up to the front if I want. We'll just drop it in here wherever, it doesn't matter. So I just moved the column order. I could change the column type. I could change the format. I can do anything I want to this data, and it will record it and keep that kind of transaction so that, again, nothing has changed on the original source, but when I import, which I'm about to do, you'll see that it's going to build out a data cube. Now, one last thing I want to describe before I get off this, and I've talked about this again in other sessions, is Microsoft Power BI supports, as of right now, 4 different languages to drive it. We're going to talk today about R. It's a statistical graphic language, but it also supports this thing called M code. M as in Mary. And M code is basically a macro language that tracks all the changes to your database. It's designed for database manipulation. And I won't go into the whole details of it because I've done it in other sessions, but you'll see there are these applied steps. And every time I made changes to this data, you can see I renamed the columns, then I reordered the columns. It's like a macro recorder that's watching me manipulate this data, and it's writing out all the code. Now, don't worry about this. I just want to show you, you can actually go look at the code by going into the advanced editor. And just like Visual Basic for applications, these are all these steps that I just told it to do. As I was manipulating the data, it was writing out all the code for that manipulation. Excuse me. This is a huge time saver because I could spend a week designing and getting all my columns right. And often when I was a data analyst, it literally took a week to get everything reset and put in the right place. We don't call it a mobile phone. We call it a cell phone. We don't call it a postal code. We call it a zip code. This data is incorrect. This formatting came incorrect. You just get it all to where it's finally perfect. And what M code does, without me doing anything, it'll write out all that source code. So this code is actually just text that I can copy and paste. And if you're familiar with Visual Basic for applications, you can just read this. It's very simple. Oh, Mike renamed the columns, and here's the column names and the order in which he put them. He took sales ID and he now renamed it to sales rep ID, right? I mean, it's nothing anyone couldn't learn, super easy just by kind of watching this. And then the next thing he did is he reordered the columns, and this is now the new order: ID, sales date, brands, color ID, store ID, etc. So you just see it all written out. Once I have that though, I can save that. And now when next month comes around, and now I would have to go manipulate all the data again and spend another week doing that and getting all my formatting done. For the transformative part, I don't have to do that anymore. I just paste in the code from last month and instantly it all gets applied. It literally saves weeks worth of work. And again, doing this, it builds my own version of the data separate from the source data, and it never changes the source data. So I'm going to show you how to do that, and then I'm going to pause and see if there are any questions. So I'm going to say, let's go ahead and close and apply. Now you're going to see I'm in Power Query. When I close and apply, you're now going to see it build the data cube. So it's now going to start loading up. And what it's doing is it's building a set of data almost as a mini database that's now on my computer. It's not the one stored on the mainframe. It's pulling data from the mainframe, and it's building my own cube for my own purposes, stored on my own system that I can now run my reports and build my stuff. So all those changes and the renaming and the restructuring are all going to get applied as my data cube gets applied. So it's coming in. I'm on a relatively slow connection, so I apologize. This takes a little longer than it normally would, but there we go. So it just pulled in these 4 tables, and I could see the tables here. You remember I had a table called relational, and it's now called sales. I had a field column called sales ID, and I renamed it to sales rep ID. So all the data is here. If I go look at my tables, I can go see, for example, the sales table, and there's all 858,549 rows. it's now part of my cube. It's physically now attached to my computer. And so why I'm telling you about this, why I'm going through this again, is because this data is now a snapshot in time. I can create a report similar to what I had back on my PowerPoint. Let's jump back to PowerPoint for a second. So I can create a report that looks like this, that tells a narrative story. Move this out of the way so I can launch. So we'll pull this up. Launch, there we go. Okay, and you'll notice, I was saying these are actually in reverse order. This should be to the far left. This executive summary, this is the perfect thing to have to the upper right. So even though I like this dashboard, it could have been improved better. The executive summary, I'll zoom in here in a second, you'll be able to see, but it's a narrative of what is the story I'm trying to say. Total sales for fiscal year 21 came in lower than expected with only 93.24% of goal. This revenue shortfall is attributed to a higher than expected quality of shoes sold, but at a lower than expected margins. And then I'm trying to tell the story of, yeah, we sold more shoes, but we sold them at a lower margin. And that's what those charts and graphs all kind of represent. So this is an example of that narrative I was talking about. Again, my only complaint, this executive summary should be the first thing up here in the upper right corner, and then the data should kind of support it flowing out of that. Now, this is great. Say, I've got an executive summary. This is wonderful. If I was attached to the mainframe in typical ways in which analytics are done, and I send this to my executives, and my executives can't get to it for another week, by the time they look at the report, the data would have changed and the points I'm making may no longer be valid, right? We would see that back in the early days of Microsoft. I'd send a report and I'm like, this got really whacked out. And by the time they look at it, it was no longer really whacked out, or something that was normal suddenly sprung off the chart. So the delay in reading the report could cause problems. It doesn't tell the story I'm trying to tell. Because Power BI creates its own data cube, that data goes with the report. It's a snapshot in time. So now when I send this file, and let me jump back to Power BI to show you what I'm talking about. I'm in Power BI. I can create some visuals and some graphics. I can do it really easy. We're not going to go into that because I do that in other sessions. I guess I could do it in 2 seconds. I throw out a visual. I want a line chart. I want the line chart to talk about the actual price. We're going to put that on the y-axis. We're going to make the x-axis is going to be our sales date. Bingo. And we'll put in our store names. Current stores here are going to be on my legend. Okay, so real simple. If that went too fast for you, don't worry about it. I wasn't trying to mess you up. Okay, so there's my sales graph right there, right? And I want to send this. Well, again, I see this huge dip, or I see some big issue that I want to call out to the execs. If it's against the live data, by the time they run the report, the data all changes. In this case, when I'm going to send this report to my executives, I can publish it online, and even if I publish it online, or if I give them the physical copy, when it saves, it's going to save in this format called PBIX. You see it right here, Power BI file format. All a PBIX is a zip file. If you're familiar in Windows with the concept of a zip file, it's a compressed folder. And if I sent this to you and shared it with you as a PBIX, you literally would see a compressed folder. And when you double click, inside that folder are my reports and my analysis, along with the data cube itself. So when I share a Power BI report, or when I publish a Power BI report, you get the report, but you also get the data cube. Does that make sense? Meaning that it doesn't update live until you tell it to do so. I'll show you how you can do that in a second. But what that also means is when I show you the data, let me show you. So I show you this data, and I'm really calling out this huge drop here of sales in this particular store. It will always be in my report because I've snapshotted the data for that moment in time, and now I can draw circles and identify and analyze it, and you will always see exactly what I meant you to see. Now, because it's all linked back to the source data, remember that Power Query, that tool that sits between Power BI and whatever your data source is, any of the hundreds and hundreds of data sources, Power Query sits between it. It will always understand the changes that I made when I call it postal code and someone calls it zip code or vice versa. It'll always remember that. So if you go back and I hit this refresh button, watch what happens. I'm going to click refresh. It's now reconnecting back to the database, and it's going to update all the data with the latest updates to the data. It's basically rebuilding the data cube now with new data up to the second at the time I ran this report. But as long as I don't hit that refresh, then I get that snapshot in time where I can draw out my story, I can explain to the executives what are happening, and they'll see it exactly as I intended it to be. Now, that was a lot of info. I'm going to pause for a second, see if there's any questions at all. Again, if you'd like to come off of your chat, if you have any questions you'd like to ask about that. Otherwise, you got a concept that we're going to build our own data set, and we're going to hand that set in with our report at the time we submit or publish the data. Any questions? I always worry when there's no questions. That's either a good sign or a bad sign. So, and I don't know which, to tell you the truth, but we'll keep going. Okay, so I've used the Power Query. I've attached to the data. I've made my own data cube. Now that I have a data cube, today's deal is all about these executive dashboards. How do we build them? I'm going to minimize this. I'm going to go over to my sheet like this. I have these executive dashboards. Let me go back to the region one. This is the dark one. And let me slide this a little bit over. I hope everyone can see. I know that's pretty small. I could probably zoom it in, but the real details probably don't matter. So these are all reports inside of Power BI that are going to help me tell this story. As I said, the smart thing would have been to take this executive summary and move it up to the upper time, take all the filters and move them to the far left and run them down this side. The filters are important, but they're only important after they've seen kind of my storyline. Because what happens is these are live filters, right? If I say only show me, for example, women's shoes, and they filter on women's shoes, watch all the gauges and charts and stuff, it will instantly update, and now it's only showing the women's version of shoes. So again, that kind of changes my narrative. If I was calling something out and they start filtering and they say, I only want women's green shoes. So they click on green. Or let's say I want women's green, and I'm holding down the control key, orange and pink shoes. And so as I do this, all the graphs and charts are only showing women's shoes that were sold in the colors green, orange, and pink. So that's the beauty of these reports, is they're dynamic. You can give them to an executive, you can give them to a manager, and the manager can start pivoting and playing. And I can set all of these, the size, the type of the shoe, the occasion shoe. I want a 3-inch heel on these women's dress shoes. If I go to type, you'll see that it removed a lot of the other types because they don't come in a 4-inch heel. So I want a slingback type of shoe, and I want it in a size between an 8 and a 9. So I'll say an 8 and 8.5 and a 9. Whoops, I'm hitting the wrong key. My apologies. 9, 8.5, and 8. And so there you go. I'm literally dynamically taking 1 million records, and I'm flipping them and filtering them and only showing women's slingback shoes in the color green, orange, and whatever I picked in these different sizes. So it allows these execs to really kind of drill in and see what's going on inside this thing. And so that's fantastic. But because I only want them to play with those filters after they've looked at my report, after they've seen my synopsis, we should really kind of move this to the far left. And that should be the last thing they work on, is once they've seen what I'm there to tell them, fine, then you can go play. But I first want to make my point. And what is my point? My point is that I want you to go through all these different parts and pieces. Here's another sample. This is by store type. So it's looking at the stores as a comparative analysis, and let me see how the stores matched up against each other. Same kind of thing. One other thing that I took a lot of grief as a analyst when I was at Microsoft. My boss, great guy, Pat Hayes, and I just spent the weekend with Pat up in Seattle, actually. I just flew back for a reunion. But we were talking and telling stories. But he did a number of things. One of the things is you got to summarize the data at really high-end level and just get right to the point. So at the top, what our execs cared most about was the numbers. Are we tracking the way we should? And I was a huge fan of using color coordination. So you'll notice that I have total sales, number of sales or number of shoes sold, and then the average price per shoe. And each of these have targets that we're trying to hit. For the year, we want to hit 90 million shoes. I think is 95 million or 94 million shoes. Number of shoes sold, we've got 800,000 or 850,000, and the average price we were hoping to get $75 per shoe, whatever. I color coordinate these. If it's red, it means we're actually coming in under goal. So you can see we're at 93% of our goal of hitting the amount of shoes. So we wanted to get 94 million. We're currently at 87.65 million. That puts us at 93% of our goal. And so that's why this is red. This is green because we're over our goal. We're actually at 102% of our goal. And this one's yellow because we're closing in. We're almost there, but we're not quite at the point. And I used to do this, and Pat once made a phrase, I thought it was hilarious. He said, your reports look like Walt Disney threw up all over your report, because I'd use all these crazy colors and all these crazy stuff. And he finally told me, don't do that. Clean them up, just get them down to a couple of colors, one color and a highlight color, etc. And I was submitting these reports to Bill Gates and the entire executive board of Microsoft. The funny thing is I did what he asked. I took all the colors out. And these are some of the smartest people on the planet. And, they didn't need all the colors. They could understand and analyze very quickly. Within a month or so, the information came back down from corporate. And they said, where are all the colors? We love the colors. Put them back in. And so I actually had to go back and recolor them. You don't want it to be so overwhelming when you look at it that you can't figure out what's going on. But especially these stoplights, as we call them, the reds, the greens, and the yellows, they instantly look at those, and that's where they want to know, are we doing fine? A real executive dashboard, and I've built these for major corporations, oftentimes we just have like 5 or 7 gauges across the top, and they're color coordinated, red, yellow, green. The executive hopes she gets to the report and she looks and it's all green. She's like, great, I can go about my day. I can just go do my executive stuff. Or maybe they're all green, but there's one yellow. She's like, I'm going to keep my eye on that for the next month and just make sure that doesn't go into despair. If an exec comes in and he looks at the report and there's 1 or 2 reds, it's an all stop. It's like, we are not doing anything until we dive into why this is red, and we're going to turn this around and we're going to get it back to the green. So I know that's simplistic to say, but it's really important to understand that is really what the execs want. I hate to say dummy down the report. It's not dummied down. It's 1 million+ records. It's just synopsizing it in very easy to understand deals. In this particular case, whatever is red, I need to then use these other reports to dig into why it's red and see if I can graphically explain and show why this particular value is not meeting our expectations. There's one other piece of data I want to show here that I think is fascinating, which is the chart down here. You can see is also color coordinated. If you're familiar with Excel, this is called conditional formatting, and it also works in Power BI. Most people don't know it's in Power BI because it's kind of in this slightly hidden place. I want to show you where it is. And in order to do that, I need to move the chat wheel out of the way. So when you do formatting of any object, if I click on the chart or I click on the graph here or this graph or whatever, and I want to change the colors, the fonts, the styles, whatever the case might be, you're going to do that by going to this secondary icon on the visualization. The first one is to build the visual itself. It's asking what type of graph or chart or whatever is this? And I can, even with it selected, I can change it. So I can go to this chart here, and I could say change this to a column chart, and it'll actually change it to a column chart. Of course, you can't see any data because I didn't do it right. But you know, graphical chart or anything, you can just click and choose what you want this to do. I'm going to put it back the way I had it. There we go. And I want to do conditional formatting. So what this is doing is, by use of color, it's showing me the darkest green are my highest value and the darkest red is my lowest value. An exec can look at this report, and even though you can't necessarily see the data numbers because the report's too small, you can instantly get a feel for what's happening in the organization. If I just look at the greens to yellows to reds, I can see a number of interesting things pop out. Number one is Philadelphia, which is up here at the top, is solidly green. They are always my number one store. They're killing it by such a wide margin. And even on the graph up here, you can see there's a huge difference between number one, number two, number three, and number four, right? They're just constantly better than everyone else. You can also see there's a pretty significant dip that happened in 2020. And sure enough, when I look at 2020, it isn't as dark of green as it used to be. So just visually, I can see something's going on in 2020. I can also see that my yellows, which used to only go down to Atlanta, now are extending a little further down into Charlotte. So in other words, all my sales are kind of shifting down. My reds are actually getting bigger and bigger as the years go on. I've got a really big red here in Seattle when they used to be an orange, and now they've turned to a dark red. So something very, very bad is happening in Seattle. Matter of fact, if I go look at my Pacific Northwest, I'm going to filter the region for the Northwest. You'll see Seattle is just plummeting off the face of the earth. It's really taken a huge drop. And I can see that just based on the colors that I see down here in the chart. So this is another fascinating way of showing it. And I use this all the time, this conditional formatting. Pick this again, come on. Sorry. There we go. I can see that. One other thing is you'll notice orange, 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 bright yellow. So Los Angeles, right here with the bright yellow, has done the opposite. It's really taken off and doing quite well. And again, if I look at the Southwest, which is where Los Angeles should be, we should see, sure enough, Los Angeles is on a huge uptick. And I see that again represented by a color that wasn't there that now suddenly is there. So this is a great way to do this. Most people don't know how to do this, so I'm going to show you real quickly where this is. We're going to select the object, so I'm selecting the table, and you're going to go to this formatting command. It's the second one in. It's got a little brush next to it. It says format your visual. When I click on this, this comes up with all of this different information. And where we're going to go is down into the cells themselves, down into the cell elements. And basically it's asking you, how do you want to apply for the cells? How do you want them to be shown? And what you have to do is you have to turn on this thing called background color. If I turn this off, you'll see it just turns to a regular Excel table. If I turn it back on, I'm applying an effect, and this FX allows me to tell it what effect I want to apply. You'll see the default is this teal to, I don't know, salmon color. That's kind of ugly color. But if I go in here, I can now change this. So I'm going to say, hey, I want the colors to represent a minimum and a maximum, and it gives me a spectrum of colors. Well, I want to do 3, so I'm going to add a middle color. And I'm going to say the lowest value, I'm going to change this to be a dark red. The highest value, I'm going to change to be a dark green or light green or anything else you want. And the middle values, I'm going to have them be yellow. So it's that stoplight. Red is bad, stop. Yellow is have caution. Green, everything's good, keep on going. And so when I say okay now, boom, I get right back to where I just was. And you can change the intensity and the colors and the styles, but I use this particular graph all the time when I'm building executive dashboards. because it's so easy. They get so used to just looking and immediately going, bam, there's a problem. Bam, this red's a problem. The increase in reds is obviously a growing trend. Something happened up here. Within seconds, they can identify and see exactly what the issues are. Okay, any questions on any of that so far? Again, I'm going to now get into technically how you do this because there's a couple of things you need to know. Okay, one other thing, you can put navigation buttons, and I have some in here just to show you. So as you build these out, each one of these is a tab in your report, and I can have multiple tabs. I'll go through these in a second. But you can, for them, you can navigate the tabs. And what that means is you can add in buttons, like you'll see here, I have regions and stores. Right now, this is the regional report, was this first page. If I want to go to the store report, I just click the button. Oh, I got a control click because I'm not in presentation mode. And it'll take me automatically to whatever tab I want. So you can build a whole navigation system and have that navigation system be part of your report. So we would say in the executive summary, here's the deal. You can see this in the cost breakdown analysis. And I can have a button that pushes that then will jump them to the cost breakdown analysis. Or maybe I say, you know, the West region really, you know, there's some interesting things happening and I want to focus on the West region. I could put a button that would automatically jump them to the West region. So I am controlling the narrative. I'm taking them through this story of what I'm trying to explain the data shows. This is a dark looking graph. Some people love the dark. Some people hate the dark. Our Fuji CEO does not like dark reports. I found that out not too long ago. And so I've learned to create the exact opposite, these very bright, open, looking reports. So let me click on this. There we go. So this is the same concept, but a completely different view. You can see same thing. These are still objects in here, right? So each one of these reports is still interactive. Even the little colors, it looks like I just kind of got a cool deal. This is actually a chart. So these are live data numbers that you're seeing that are surrounding this particular data set. This is set for Philadelphia. I say I want to see just Louisville sales. All the data changes to reflect only Louisville. So I can move up and down and pick different cities, getting exactly the data I need. Again, all of them update the second I pick it, and when I click off, I'm back to where I was. A couple good things about this report. I have the information up here. It's very easy to read. Notice I have graphics that are telling me, hey, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Washington, D.C. all have this green up arrow. It means they've all been trending up. That means I can see on the graph, they're all kicking up to a much higher level. The ones that are in red, unfortunately, Charlotte, Las Vegas, they're all going down for some reason. So I'm calling out the anomalies so the execs don't have to do the work. They just look and they're like, oh, we got 3 greens up and 2 reds down. What's going on? Let's dig into it. It allows them to do it. I have shading on here, and I use this white on kind of off-white to really make it look almost a 3-dimensional effect. I'm going to show you how to do it. When I put numbers and totals, 87 million, this is the number of shoes sold, and then I put some reference underneath it. In this case, I say this is against a goal of 90 million. So again, it's not just, hey, the data point is 87, and everyone goes, is that a good number or a bad number? It's against a goal of 90 million, and I can determine if that's up or down or how close we are. So every single number has some reference marker to it, showing it how it's being done. It looks nice. It's got a lot of colors, but it's not an overwhelming amount of colors. One thing I could put on here is a little narration to explain what it is I'm trying to say, but I just wanted to give you a different feel from a graphics perspective on how this stuff works. Now let's talk about technically. Well, let me pause for a second, see if there's any questions. Haven't been any questions so far. Okay, I'll just keep going until there are some. So I want to show you now how you make these. And it took a lot of trial and error to figure this out. It is easy to make these the wrong way. As a matter of fact, I built one in here, and it's called Bad Design. And this is the way you create these in a very, very bad way. what I did, because I wanted these different colors and I wanted the kind of shading and I wanted the eye to be drawn to certain ways, I put each one of these things in as its own element. So for example, this border background thing is its own element. I can click on it independently, but you'll notice that it starts messing up other parts and components within here. If I, for example, click on the background, everything goes away. And this happens a lot if you do it this way. If you try to draw out each component as its own graphical piece, and I'm going to explain why. What I'm talking about when I say draw out a component as its own graphical piece, I can go to the insert command, and there are different shapes that I can put. So let's say I wanted a new 3D looking shape for something I'm going to put an object on. Okay, so there it is. That's a 3D shape. And let's say I want this to be light yellow. I wouldn't really do this, but I'll just use it as an example. I'm going to lay this out. I want this entire background area here to be light yellow. How would I do that? Well, I would have to go into the graphics part of this, the formatting of this. I would go into the style here, because style is where I set things like fill color and everything else. Let's make it orange since I don't have yellow loaded here. So now I've got this big orange thing. And then just like Word and PowerPoint and everything else, you got to right click on this and send to back. There's also a format button up here. So if you go to format, I can send it all the way to the back of the page, send to back. And now you'll see it's going to disappear here, I think. Yep, disappeared. Well, the reason why is I've got another black one in the back. So then I got to move it forward one. So then you're like, let's bring it forward by one particular object. And you just have to keep going back and forth and back and forth. And there you go. I finally have it in the right position. You saw how long it took for me to get that into the right space. And the reason why is that Microsoft uses something called draw calls. Draw calls take any shape that you put in there, they divide them up into triangles. There's millions of triangles in any kind of graphic image that you're doing. And it puts aside memory space in video to remember what order and what graphic and what space needs to go where. And those draw calls, the more draw calls you use, the more your video card gets bogged down, and unless you got a gamer PC with some really fast videos, they'll start to lag quite a bit, especially when you get a big, complex, multi-layer, multifaceted scene. So as I work around this, you're gonna see like suddenly it jumps to the front, then I click over there, then it's in the back. I wanna get this, or if I click here, did I click on the orange part or did I click on the black part? I thought I was clicking on the black part, but it's actually on the orange part. Now I'm on the black part, now everything's gone away. And this gets really confusing and it's really, really hard to use. So I'm going to show you how to get around this. We're going to talk about this first. This is a bad design. I don't want you to draw all these shapes out. I've looked at a number of YouTube videos where they actually recommend doing this. And I'm like, no, 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 no. That's someone who does not do this for a living. You will pull your hair out and you'll give it up because these get so complex and they get so crazy. Plus, it slows the report down by significant margin when you do it this way. So I'm going to show you a better way to do this, and I'm going to show you a cheap tool to do this with, and I'll show you an expensive tool. So I just got rid of that object so we don't have quite that problem, but I've still got the issue, right? Each one of these is drawn as its own box. So there's a label box on a graph box, on a white border box, sitting on a black border box. It just gets crazy and confusing, and unless you have really good mouse skills, you're going to be very, very frustrated as this thing goes on. And I don't know if you can tell because you can't tell when I click. I clicked to get out of that, and it took at least 3 seconds for it to redraw the screen because of all those draw call things I was talking about. If I didn't do it this way, if I go back to the original Power BI sheet that I was working on, like this, you can see it's instantaneous. I click, I'm in the graph. I click, I'm in the graph. I click over here, I got the pull down. It's much snappier, it's much faster, but I still want the beautiful shadows, and I still want the edging and the lines, and I want it to look good. So what we're gonna do is we're going to, let's just create a new page from scratch, and I'll show you how you can do this. I've already got the data all plumbed together on this particular report. And the way I approach this is I start with, again, the narrative. What is the story I'm trying to tell? The first thing I typically will do is I'll take a text box and I'll put it in the upper corner, and this should simply be what the report is. Sales 2023, Y over Y growth, right? So this is the point of what this whole chart is. And again, later I'll go back and reformat it and make it big and colored and everything. I'm just getting the data up here right now. So that's the first foremost thing I would put on there. Then right below that, I'd go ahead and add another text box, and this is where I'd put my narrative. This is literally the story you're going to tell the execs. And just grab a big box, it doesn't matter how big, we'll resize it later, but you want to keep that space, because this, remember, that upper left real estate is the most important. And this is where I'd write, hey, month over month, we're looking pretty good. We've got 12% growth in this, a little warning over here, because I'm starting to see some diminished returns on blah, 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 blah. You just kind of write it all out. This is typically what the execs will most focus on when you do this. Then the next thing I do is I just, in very generic terms, I start throwing out some of these charts. Right, so I think I'd like a line chart here. So you just put it on the page. Notice it's underneath the chart up here. I maybe want a funnel chart here. So I'm gonna grab that. This would look a lot better if it was off to the side. So you're just gonna put the objects on here. Don't put any data in, don't worry about anything. Just get them kind of laid out on the screen the way you want them to be. Now, when the time comes to get the formatting and the graphics and everything else, what I'm going to do is when I get all these set in place, I'm going to take a snapshot of this, and I'm going to kind of get a feel of physically what dimensions I'm going to need in order to display the information. I would actually make these charts, show data, because I need to see exactly how big they have to be in order to show the data I want to show. But I don't do any special formatting on them, anything. I'm just placing them on the page to get them kind of figured out. Now, there's a couple of tools you can use for snapshots. The free and easy one, if I hit print screen, Windows comes with this thing called Snippet. And it is, by default, it's built in every copy of Windows that's out there. And what it allows you to do is use your cursor and just highlight over this. I didn't do that well. Highlight over exactly what it is I'm trying to copy, right? So in this case, I want to copy out the screen. And what it did is it just put that out to my clipboard, and I could go paste this into an app and I could start playing with it or work with it. I personally, and this is not a, I guess it is an endorsement, but it's not like a paid endorsement. I get nothing out of this. I just used for years this program called Snagit, and many of you have probably heard of Snagit. The reason I like Snagit is Snagit will allow you to capture screens. It'll allow you to capture sections of screens. It'll allow you to go do annotations, and I do this all the time. I want to call out a particular graph or chart. I can actually go up to Snagit and draw out circles, making sure that I'm showing, hey, here is where you need to look, right? This is the data point that I'm really trying to call out and make a point about. The other thing I like about Snagit is you can use these stamps, and they have stamps with numbers on it. So if I put in the number 1, for example, I'm just filtering, and you can see they have black circle ones, red circle, red tabs. So what I do is I grab one of these red circles and you just drop it on the page, and this tells the executive I am talking about number 1. So in my narrative, I would put 1: sales have dropped 22%. And when they look at the chart, they actually see the 1 and the circle, and they know exactly what I'm talking about. So it kind of guides them around my report, showing them exactly what I want to do. Again, I get no endorsement from talking about Snagit. It's just a tool I've used forever. It's very, very popular. I use it every single day. It's cool, but Snippet works, you know, it does the snips. It'll allow you to get the copies. It's just not quite as robust. But whatever the case is, you take a snapshot of the page itself. And then once we have that, we can go do some designing. Now, again, same kind of thing, the cheap version and the expensive version. The cheapest way to do this, and I use this a lot, is PowerPoint. Let's just open up our PowerPoint here. I'm gonna go back to PowerPoint. And you can go down here. I've got some other reports. I've showed you some things like that. Come back to that one. And what you can do is in PowerPoint, you can just start laying out graphical elements. So I started playing with one the other day. I thought it'd be cool to have a Fuji background that's kind of semi-transparent. And I wanted to do some interesting, cool effects in here. I did all of this in PowerPoint. And this obviously is PowerPoint. The way this works, let me just get rid of these for a sec, is I put in a background on the slide, right? So I got Mount Fuji here. And then into the text, I added this special effect. I'll show you how to do effects. And then you can just draw out shapes. Now remember, if I took a snippet of the screenshot of kind of how I lay it out, I now know in general up in this quadrant is going to be this chart, and up here is going to be this graph, and I can now put that down so I can build my interface around the amount of real estate that I think I need. So I guess I should show you that since I just did it a second ago. Let's go back to our Power BI. So here's a simple example, right? And I'm going to go ahead, I'll do it with Snagit just so you can see. I'm going to capture the screen. So I hit the capture button. This also can be tied automatically. And I'm just going to capture the entire screen. You'd probably draw it out a little nicer and do this. But once I have this, I can copy. The other thing I like too about Snagit is it keeps all of your captures. So I can go back in time a month ago to stuff I captured, where Snippet only generally keeps the last thing that you snipped into memory. This keeps them all, it saves them. But once I've got this, I can now save this file or paste this file or do whatever. I would say File, I would go Save As, and I would just save this as like my background, and I could change the format, but PNG is just fine. I'm going to put this somewhere where I will remember where I put it, so I'll throw it into my pictures. There we go, and I'll hit save. And now once I have that saved, I can open this up inside of PowerPoint. And when I set my background, right, I can put a background, I can format in a picture, I can set the background, change the picture on this device. For example, I would change it to that PNG that I just took. I don't want to do that right now because I want to use this Fuji image, but just to show you, I could paste in the background, which shows me the locations of the charts, where my narrative is going to go, where the menus are going to go, all that stuff that I've already kind of laid out. Once I have this background, then I just throw in these shapes. So I'm going to go in one more time. I'm going to go to shapes. I like to use the rounded edges. So the square with the rounded edges or rounded corners, but you can do whatever you want. You can make them hard squares or circles or whatever. And you just lay these things out. Now, every time you lay them out, they're going to come in at 100% opacity. So they're going to cover up what's behind there. That's perfectly fine. However, I really like, just as my personal preference, to go into these, and when you look at the shape fill, and I click on the shape fill button, I can go in with these colors, and I can actually change their percentage of transparency. And so I will do that on a regular basis, right? I might pick a slightly different color, and the way you change the transparency, you have to go under more fill colors. And you'll see right down here, the transparency is 100, meaning it's completely blocking everything. If I change this, let's say to 70, you're gonna see when I hit apply, I actually see through the color where I'm now picking up the background. So it still gives me this slight shade of blue. Maybe 70 is a little too high in this case. Maybe I would go back, again, more fill colors. I've got the color instead of 70. Let's make this maybe 55 or something close to that. I'm just guessing, 55. Usually you'll find a color that works really well. It's still got the blue, so I clearly see the blue, but I also have that transparency where I can see through it. And now I would just align these around my graphics to get them exactly how I want them. I'm just going to save some time and copy and paste. Whoops, I grabbed the wrong thing. That was good, Mike. Let's copy and let's go ahead and paste a new one. There we go. Maybe I'll resize this. Excuse me. So I'm going to pull this down, move this down to this deal, drag it out. Wow, I'm sorry. Okay. It's totally up to you, the look, the design, how much transparency, the color, but this is absolutely the cheapest and easiest way to do this is do it in PowerPoint. I can also put effects on these. Well, what are the effects? This is where you get into shadow effects. This is where you get it to make it look three-dimensional. So I often use this first one here, put a little shadowing on it. It looks like it's kind of standing out from the page. Notice it kind of darkens because you're seeing the shadow underneath the transparency. So you might want to adjust the color as appropriate. I can put some effects on the lines. So the outline, I want it to have a white outline instead of a black outline. I want the outline to be much thicker, so I'm going to give it a higher weight. So I'll make this, forgot to select my object. Let's try that again. Shape outline, I want the weight to be much, much thicker. I want the outline to be white instead of black. I'm just giving you examples. These aren't necessarily good examples, but just showing you how I can make the borders look exactly the way I want, make everything great. Now, here's the most important part of this whole thing. Check my time, make sure I'm doing okay. The most important part of the whole thing is get it the way you want it, let you see it. I could now go back and delete that background that has all the components and parts. So now I just have the panels and the shadows and the things that I need, and they're all in the right place. At this point, this is where I would use Snagit or Snippet, whichever tool you want. And what I would do is I'm going to go ahead and capture this, and you want to capture the exact dimensions of this page. So I start up here in this upper right corner. Now, again, it sounds like I'm doing a commercial for Snagit, but one of the things I love is I want to literally get to the pixel corner, and it's hard to do at this resolution. I kind of move it around and try to a little bit there, and now I went too far, and now I got to go back. Well, what you can do is you can get close, and then you just use the arrow keys, and I can move one dot at a time till I get right to the edge of where I want to be. Click and hold, drag it down to the opposite corner, and again, I'm going to use my arrow keys once I get close, and I'll go arrow left, and up or down. I got to go down 2, and now I'm right at that edge. And now pixel perfect, I just captured this screen exactly as I want it to be. So I'm going to take that photo. It opens it up. You can see it's a perfect rendition of what I need. And this, again, I would go ahead and save as background 2, whatever you want to call it. I give it a name. It really doesn't matter. It'll default to PNG, and that's perfectly fine for Power BI. So we'll call this background 2. You would have a much better name than what I've picked. And so the last step you have to do, once I finally got this all laid out and done, you're going to go back into Power BI. And the mistake that people make is you can go in here and say insert, and you can insert a picture in here. So I have an image and I can pick background 2, right, as the image that I want to do. So I go to pictures and there's background 2, and I say that's the one I want. And sure enough, it inserts it, and now I make it run full screen. So I got to pull it out so it's running full screen, and you kind of have to adjust it and do all that stuff. This is, again, the wrong way to do this, because now it is a selectable layer inside my, I picked the wrong image, as I just noticed. This is the one with the layouts on it, but it's still a selectable image. I don't want to do that. Instead, rather than inserting an image and going from there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out here, and there's a couple ways to do this. I think I can just right click here. So click anywhere in the empty page. I know it's not letting me do that. Okay, so we'll do it the other way. You go back to your formatting of the report and it says canvas background. We want to set the image in as a canvas background instead of building it as a image frame. Because if it's an image frame, it's clickable. And if it's clickable, you're going to be trying to hit a graphic and you're going to hit the image frame and all of a sudden everything's going to go away and they're just looking at that image in here. If instead I set it as a background, if I go in here and browse and I say, okay, give me this one that says Fuji, background 2, and I say, okay, it's going to put in the Fuji. It's pulling it from the cloud. You can see down here. Where'd it go? Let's try that one more time. I might have missed. My apologies. We're going to go to canvas background. It says background 2. That's interesting. I don't see it, but it should be right there. But anyway, I've already got this just in case this happened. And go back here. It's one of these. Which one am I in? Shoe light. This should be it. Well, I'll just use this one as an example. My apologies. That kind of caught me by surprise. It should have just automatically popped it in. This, what you're seeing, all the shadowing, all the 3D effects, etc. Notice I'm selecting it right now. I'm clicking on it, and it's not clickable. What it just did there is if you double click anywhere, you'll put the Q&A tool in. But I can't, in trying to hit one of these, if I miss, it's not going to evoke that and then make everything else go away. So by inserting it as a canvas background, it's a permanent part in the background and it can't be selected. And that's exactly what we want. So when people try to make executive dashboards, they make these mistakes. They try to insert them as images and then they get filtered up and they get thrown into the rotation. When you click on them, they start making draw calls, so they slow stuff down. It's just a huge, huge burden. What I want to show you is get an idea, lay out in Power BI what you want, take a snapshot of that, then go over into PowerPoint and using that, make that a guide to lay out all of these circular deals. I'm going to send you, by the way, links that describe exactly how to do all this stuff. I found some great articles. I didn't do it. I learned from others. I'm going to share those others links and locations with you. But you kind of lay these things out the way you want it, and then you take another snapshot once you get it all nicely formatted, and then you'll put that in when you build this. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I'm just going to delete everything, all these charts and graphs and stuff. We'll just make them go away, and you can see what that background looks like. And obviously I got some text here and stuff, but literally the canvas background is 1, 2, 3, 4 of these white panel images. It's all the same image compiled together and set as the canvas background. And again, can't touch it, can't click it, can't do anything. When I decide I want to publish this, go back, go back, go back. I'm undoing, undoing, undoing. There we go. Okay, so now I'm back to where I was. I'm gonna go ahead and publish this. And so when you publish a report, if I go back here, see on the home button, I have published. This is gonna take my data cube and the reports that I created. I really don't wanna save, but okay, I'll save. It's gonna take the data, the reports, it's gonna take everything that I did, and now it's going to generate that and move that up into the Microsoft Cloud. You, by default, you get your own workspace. You see that here. You also have the ability to publish it into a team site. You also have the ability to put it into a corporate share site. I'm just going to use this, my workspace for now. That's the one that everyone has their own version. And it says, hey, you've already got one up here. Should I go ahead and do this? Now, again, the important point is I'm taking this report, I'm publishing it online, and not only is the report going with it, but the entire data cube that I created that the report is generated off of goes with it. That's why it's taking it a few seconds to load this up. The beauty though is once I now share this out with anyone, they get my data cube and my data report and they can play with it all day long. What I want to show you again though is when this gets published, it's now optimized for web graphics. And so the same thing, the draw calls, the everything. Notice I'm loading up my browser. I'm connecting in via Office 365 into my report itself. So take it just a second. It's the first time I've loaded it. And there it is, and all the graphics are there, all the shadows, the colors, everything exactly as I created it, and it's all live. So I'm currently looking at Las Vegas. I don't want Las Vegas, I want to see them all. I take Las Vegas off, and all my data comes back exactly as I want it. So this is now a report that I could electronically share with my management team. They could start asking questions, they could start spinning it and turning it. They could use the narration. Remember how I could jump to one part or another part of the report? So this was, at the time I published, I had told it to look at 3-inch heels, metallic, women's shoes, slingback, etc. We did that in our demo, but these buttons still work. I want to go look at the store focus only. I click on store, boom, it goes to the store. And I could have this one now have navigation to go into page 3 or page 4 or page 5, whatever. Or if they wanted to, they could just jump exactly to whichever page most interests them. So anyway, this is how we do it. We create this narration, we describe for them, we capture it in our data, and we keep it locked so that they can see exactly what it was I'm, as an analyst, trying to show them. We put it all out. Let me go back to my PowerPoint, kind of wrap all this up for you today. One other thing I did want to talk about too, I mentioned this, but I want to go a little deeper into this. I told you that M-code was one of the languages that Microsoft supports. There are 4. Python is another language that Microsoft supports, but another very fascinating one is this thing called R. R is in Richard, R code. R code allows you to create your own statistical visuals. It's a visual programming language really designed around graphing and visuals. And I just grabbed just a few examples of different types of reports that you can make using R code, okay? So whether it's a flow from process to process, whether it's a maximum minimum ribbon, scatter charts, topological charts, there's literally thousands of these. These are all custom made. Well, what does that mean, custom made? Well, if I go back here, you'll notice in Power BI, Microsoft only gives me a certain set of graphs that I can use. I didn't want to say no, let me get out of that. So it gives me all these different charts. There's about, 20 different charts that Microsoft provides me. But there are times when you need to create your own visuals. It's different than what Microsoft allows you to have. So you'll notice if you know how to program in Python, there's a Python connector. If you know how to program in R, there's an R script connector. So I could click this, and using R script, I can create my own version of my visual graphic that I want to use. And I'm going to send you a link. I think I copied it in here. Maybe I didn't. I will put it in, which is a free teach yourself R language out on the web. Organization that I found uses it. They're great. They just teach simple stuff. If you understand Visual Basic, you're probably 90% there. It's very similar to Visual Basic, just a few nuances that are different. And you just start ripping through your data and say, I want to graph this way, and I want to put it here, and you can build these stunning, stunning visuals. So you have the ability to totally change out. I'll definitely tell you in oil and gas, some of the banks and financial institutions, they build their own R statistical graphs based on how they want to see the data. So if you can't find it up here in the defaults of Power BI, R is the way which you can go build your own and kind of put it all into whatever look and feel that you want. Okay. This is a link. You're going to get this again today. This is a link that will take you into how to use PowerPoint as a template to build out some advanced visuals. It's step by step. It's super easy. I didn't create it. Someone else did, but I'm sharing it with you because I thought it was a really good resource. Again, if you have a graphics department or if you're a Photoshop fiend like I am, I was showing you the free way, which is using PowerPoint in order to do your graphics. You go into Photoshop and you can really do some beautiful nuanced shading and graphics and bleeds and everything that you can do in Photoshop, you can use to build that canvas background. and just build some magnificent reports. The last thing I will tell you before we kind of do any Q&A and close out this whole thing is go out and just put in examples of beautiful Power BI dashboards in a Google search, and you will see thousands of the most creative, gorgeous reports there are out there. Hopefully, now that you've been through today's session, you know what to look for. You remember about the important real estate. You remember that you need to summarize using stoplight on the top. Just do it. You remember to put your narrative story in here. You remember to put your jump links to any pages that you want to back up with correlating data. You remember, don't do what I did. You should move these filters off to the far left, because I want them only to do that after they've read through all my data and seen what there are. You remember conditional formatting is a great way to show tabular data, but very quickly with using colors as a way to kind of dive in and get the information that you need. And you kind of have everything you need now to go build out the most beautiful, amazing stuff there is. And it gets us away from these really kind of ugly, standardized Power BI reports that don't mean anything and don't say anything, and your execs wouldn't know what to do with this, or your management staff, or whoever you build this for. They just wouldn't understand what the concept of this whole thing might be. So with that, I'm going to take any questions that you have. I'm going to remind you that Fuji does consulting services for this. We set up data cubes and data factories. We can build reports. I am a teacher. I can't even tell you how many Power BI classes I've done, well over 100 in the last 30 years. It's all hands-on, so if you want training for your people, we can help you with that. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something new. I tried to show you things that you may not see out of books and other classes. These are kind of the people who really do it, learn some of the tips and tricks and how to put this stuff together. But if you do need us at Fuji, we are absolutely there. We are more than happy to help you. And the last thing, and again, I'll include this in the email I'll send you today. That email will include a copy of today's video, so you'll have a copy, all of my materials, including all the links to the resources and everything else you need. And the last thing I always put in is a link back to these every other week webinars. These are free, they're fun. I try to make them engaging. They're not meant to be huge sales, pushy kind of things. I want you to come back again and again and learn as much as you can.